All right, so what we're doing in this set of notes is we're learning another way to solve quadratics. You know how to solve them by factoring, by graphing, by taking the square root and completing the square. And finally, we finally have the quadratic formula. And so when you have something in the quadratic formula, it must be in standard form, where x squared comes first, and then the x, and then the number. And we're going to have to identify the pieces A, B, and C. Now this is going to be a little awkward because usually we do this and we sing together, but I'm just going to have to sing by myself and hope I sound as good as I think I do. Okay, so the way it is if you've ever heard the song Frère Jacques, and it's a repeating song. And so when we do this in class, I'm going to actually have you sing it with me. I know it's cheesy, I know it's silly, but something about having to sing a song, it helps you remember what the formula is, and then you have it memorized. So the way it goes is opposite of B, and then you would repeat opposite of B, plus or minus square root, plus or minus square root, B squared minus 4AC, B squared minus 4AC, all over 2A, all over 2A. And that's what this is. Right here, this is opposite of B, so negative B, plus or minus the square root, and then B squared minus 4AC, all over 2A. Hold on, my cat's meowing. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use the song to go ahead and do a couple of problems down here. So, skip right here. Okay. So the first thing that has to happen, and maybe we should write this up here, we have to make sure that it always equals 0. So just like factoring, we have to have it equal to 0. Just like graphing, we have to have it equal to 0. We can only have the numbers A, B, and C, so it must equal 0. So right here, it equals 5, so I need to move this 5 to the other side by minusing 5. So I get x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, so now that I have my things alone, I know my A is the number in front, and that number in front is 1. My B is the second number, the number that's just in front of x, so negative 4, and my C is negative 5. So that's the information I need. Okay, let's change colors. Let's go blue. All right, so now when I say things the second time, the repeating time, that's when I'm going to write it. So it starts off opposite of B, and then opposite of B is a positive 4. Plus or minus square root, plus or minus square root. Now this is where it gets really fast, so you have to write fast. B squared minus 4AC, so there's B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2A, all over 2A, and that's it. So that's what we have to do. We have to start off by plugging that in. All right, so now what's going to happen is, let's highlight this puppy. We need to find this part under the square root. Now do not use the square root sign, because sometimes that's going to give us a decimal and we're not allowed to have decimals. I just need to find that part. And that piece in there, so that's 4 squared is 16, minus 4 times 1, which is 4, times 5, which is 20, but because there's 2 negatives there, it becomes 20. So I get 4 plus or minus the square root of 36 all over 2. All right, I'm going to have to give myself some space. Hold on. There, oops. Give myself a little bit of space. There we go. All right, so now I know what the square root of 36 is, so I need to do this. So I get 4 plus or minus 6 over 2. Well, this is where you have to do the two parts. 4 plus 6 divided by 2, which is 10 divided by 2. So my first answer is 5. And then I have to do the next answer for minus 6 divided by 2, excuse me, which is negative 2 divided by 2, which is negative 1. So those are the two answers we get. Let's see if I can, I'm not going to move that thing over. We'll draw a line to kind of give us some space. Okay? All right, so here's an example of when it works perfectly and you get exact numbers. This is not always going to happen. All right, so now let's do this again. If you notice, it equals 0, so I can say what my A is. My A is 8, my B is negative 8, and my C is 2. And so now I'm going to change colors and do my song. Opposite of B. That's right, opposite of B. So that's 8 plus or minus square root, plus or minus square root, b squared minus 4ac. So b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Whew, that's long. Okay, so again, we do just what's inside right here. And you can work it out by hand, or you can take out your calculator and use it. Negative 8 squared is a positive 64. 4 times 8 is 32. Times 2 again is 64. And look at this, 64 minus 64 is just 0. So I get 8 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 16. Well, the square root of 0 is just 0. And if I add 0 or subtract 0, I'm still just going to get 8 over 16, which reduces to 1/2. So that's the answer. Okay? So what we're going to do now is I need you to go to your second page of notes, and I would like you to try numbers 1 and 2. Number 1 is already set up with A, B, and C. When you think you have it, press play. Okay, so A was 2, B was 3, C was negative 20. That's pretty big. So opposite of B, so negative 3, plus or minus square root, B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. All right, so now, again, we look right here. And again, you can use your calculator or you can use your brain, whichever one. So 3 squared is 9, minus 4 times 2 is 8, times 20 is 160, right? So it's minus negative 160. Those two become plus. So I get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 169 over 4. And the square root of 169, I believe, is 13. Let me double check. We were correct. So it's negative 3 plus or minus 13 all over 4. So this becomes negative 3 plus 13 over 4, which is 10 over 4, which I would like you to reduce to 5 over 2. There's one answer. And then we got to do the minus one, negative 13 minus 13 over 4. Which is negative 16 over 4, which is negative 4. So there's the second answer. We kind of took up a lot of space, so I'm going to move that thing right here. Let me get this puppy. Can I get it? Yeah. Let's see if I can grab it. Hold on. Okay, for number 2, I went ahead and gave us some space. So for number 2, again, go ahead and start it. I would like you to go ahead and make sure you can put it in the right order and identify your A, B, and C. And then once you got those correct, then you can go through and try and solve it. Okay, so you should have added 10. I feel like maybe I should change colors. Let's do this rainbow color. This one's fun. So I get 2x squared. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Minus 7x plus 7 equals 0. And so you identify your A, your B, and your C. And once you have that, you can go ahead and sing the song in your head or out loud and give it a try. So you should have had 2, negative 7, and 7. Doesn't look like a 7. There we go. And so opposite of B. We keep getting negative b's, but it's not always going to be that. Sometimes you're going to have a negative out front. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so again, we're going to highlight it, do the little math, and so I get 49 minus 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 7 is 56. Okay, so 49 minus 56, that's a negative 7. So I'm going to get 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 all over 4. I can't take the square root of 7, and if I break down 7, I just get 7. So the only thing I could do is take out this I. And so to take out the I, the negative, it becomes an I. So it becomes 7 plus or minus I square root of 7 all over 4. And that's the answer. There's nothing you could do. You can't simplify it anymore. You just write that. Okay, one last one like this, and then we're going to go back to the front and finish our notes on that part. All right, so go ahead and start number 3 by moving things over, identifying your ABC, and then press play to make sure you have it right, and then you can try the problem. Okay, so you would have minus 3, so you get negative 6x squared plus 3x minus 1 is 0. So A is negative 6. And we finally got a B as a positive, and C is negative 1. I'm going back to that rainbow. That was fun. All right, so opposite of B, negative B, plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Okay, so let's take care of this radical again, see what's underneath there. And 3 squared is 9. Negative 4 times negative 6 is a positive 21. Times a negative 1 is a I'm sorry, not 21, but 24. It's a negative 24. Because there's 3 negatives, so it's going to stay negative. So I'm going to get negative 3 plus or minus negative 15. Oops, I lost my pencil. Negative 15. All over negative 12. Okay? And so, again, I can't really break down 15. If I do break down 15, I just get 3 and 5, so I'm not going to be able to take anything out. So it becomes negative 3 plus or minus I square root of 15 all over negative 12. Now, here's something that's a little picky. You're not supposed to be able to divide by a negative. So what happens is I'm just going to get rid of it. And the reason I can get rid of it is if I change the signs. And look here anyways. I have a negative on the bottom and the top, so I can just make that positive, okay? What I could also do, and this is what a lot of teachers are going to want you to do, is they're going to want you to break it down here. And the reason they would want you to break it down is because 3 over 12 reduces to 1/4. Now here, usually I would move this negative up to the top, but I already have a plus or minus, so the negative is just going to make it a minus plus, which is essentially the same thing. So that's the answer if you break it down. A little tricky, but not that hard. As long as you get up to here, this point right here, I am good if you can get up to there. All right, the last thing we have to do is there's a word called the discriminant, and you just need to be aware what it is. The discriminant is just the part that is b squared minus 4ac. And if you know the value of what's under the root, then you know what kind of answer you're going to have. You're going to get 2 real solutions when the b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. And the reason you get 2 real solutions is, let's look down here. When I had the square root of 36, right here, I was able to find 2 answers because I would add 6 and subtract 6. When I had the square root of 169 on number 1 down here, same thing. The square root of 169 was 13, so I was able to add 13 and subtract 13, so I was able to get 2 real answers. The only time you're able to get one answer was the second example we did, and that's when b squared minus 4ac equals 0. And the reason you only get one answer is because I can't really add or subtract 0. It's going to give me the same answer. It's not going to do anything. So when you take the square root of a 0, it's only going to have the one answer. And lastly, the no real solutions is whenever I tried to take the square root of a negative. And so when it was less than 0, it gave me an imaginary solution. All right, so what I would like you to do is there are 3 problems where you need to try and figure out what type of solutions it is. You need to make sure it equals 0. You need to move things over and figure out A, B, and C, and then plug it into b squared minus 4ac to see what happens. All right, go ahead and check each one, and then you can check your work with me. Okay, so A was 1, B was 4, C was 3. On this one, A was 1. If I move this 4x over, you get B is negative 2, and there is no C. This one here, A is negative 1, B is negative 1. And if you move that C over, you get negative 4. Okay, so hopefully you did okay. The first one you get a positive 4, so that's 2 real. Second one you also got a positive 4, so that's 2 real. On this one you get a negative, so that's 2 imaginary. All right, so hopefully after doing this assignment and singing the song multiple times, it'll help you remember it, which will help you solve the problems.